Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan-Green, journalist and mum of two with an interest in education. And in this episode we are speaking with Jenny Turner from Human Fabric. She has both personal and professional insights into ADHD as a coach of how it can be better supported in the workplace. Jenny Turner, thank you so much for being with us on School Shorts.
Thanks for having me along.
And I said there that you work with people in the workplace setting, but I think it's really important to have a discussion as parents and as an adult who's had a diagnosis yourself, just about that personal journey. And I think that that's something that really helps in a school setting and talking about the kinds of topics we talk about on this podcast. So thank you for being willing to do that.
Yeah.
It's quite a personal thing to talk about. Can we start just with why it is important to have this discussion and why we are feeling potentially like we are having more of a discussion about neurodiversity and ADHD at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's important because we're not having the discussion enough. And so there's lots of people that are sort of quietly wondering, why they're struggling with this or why they feel different or why things are the way they are, and not understanding their difference and not understanding that, there is no normal brain, that these are all perfectly natural variations in the way that humans are wired. Also that there are a whole lot of strengths that come from being wired differently. And I think when people start to share a bit more, you get this kind of validation of your experience, and you realise I'm not the only one going through this, be that for yourself or for your kids as a parent. So, raising the awareness and having the conversation, I think helps with people's mental health and well-being, and it also helps to kind of share what works, strategies and approaches that work for different types of brains,
Tell me about how Human Fabric became for you and what you were doing before this, because it wasn't something you naturally set out to do as a career, was it? It came about because of a personal reason.
No, I didn't leave university thinking I would be a neurodiversity consultant. I started in environmental science, so a long way from neurodiversity. And as I became more sort of technical in environmental science, I realised I was far more interested in the people kind of aspects of the work and sort of understanding all of the bits of the project and how it all connected together. And so I ended up getting into project management. And I became frustrated at how we would put technical people into these project management roles without any kind of, leadership development training or any training on how to manage the work of a group of people for that matter. And so I ended up progressing into a kind of business improvement role within professional services, so shaping up exactly that, how we train technical people to be great people leaders. It was in that time that I found out I had ADHD myself. And so I got really curious about, what do I need to do my best work in the workplace?
So how, do you mind me asking how old, roughly, how old
42,
you were?
42.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was it that made you start to explore the potential that you had ADHD?
So I think looking back, the traits were always there, but I think what happened was there's a connection between hormones and dopamine in ADHD. And so when women hit perimenopause, their estrogen starts to drop, and essentially your ADHD traits become more pronounced. So what I had sort of coped with before through various, coping mechanisms and strategies and ways of organising myself was sort of overwhelmed as the ADHD traits became more pronounced. Right. So that was part of it. Also, I think with the children getting diagnosed, we were looking into it for the children as well. We were wondering for the children. And I started to realise that ADHD isn't what I thought it was. It's not just the 6-year-old boy bouncing on the couch or being disruptive in the classroom. And the more I read about how it presents in women in particular and in adults, I was like, whoa. And you mean not everyone thinks like this? You mean not everyone has 1,000 thoughts running through their mind all the time?
Yeah.
You sort of slowly realise, oh.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe too, because I feel like myself and certainly all the close people around me have been like that. So I kind of thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And not, I guess, normal for want of a better term, because, as there is no such thing really as a normal thought pattern, really.
There are more common brain types. So the whole sort of neurotypical thing is around, the more common presentations of how people are wired and how they sense, the world, how they communicate, how they respond. These different conditions that we've had to sort of put a bucket around. This group of traits, we'll call that ADHD. This group of traits, we'll call that autism. I think the definitions of these are still shifting.
So from a parenting perspective, you mentioned that you have two boys. They both have ADHD as well.
Yep.
What was that like for you, finding out you had it, as well as your children? That's quite a journey of discovery all at once.
Yeah, and it was within about an 18-month period, I think, that all played out. It was, so initially you get the sense of relief because it's kind of an explanation for what you've been wondering, and you kind of have almost an imposter syndrome, like, maybe I'm just a bad parent, or maybe I'm just, not trying hard enough, or you have all these questions in your mind. So it is a sense of relief when you're diagnosed because you kind of have an explanation for what you're experiencing. And then you go through the kind of what ifs, you sort of revisit a lot of your past and think about how things might have been differently, might have been different, or what you might have done differently with this new knowledge. And then you kind of discover more and more about what actually works for your brain and for your children, in this case, to kind of, create an environment that brings out the best in them, that sort of supports their challenges, but also harnesses their strengths,
And so you had a obviously very successful career and then start moving into this field, which we'll talk about a little later on too, about supporting workplaces and people in workplaces to make the most of the superpowers that you can have. But what were you feeling kind of on a personal level about how you were able to manage the ADHD diagnosis for all of your family at home?
It was pretty overwhelming. The whole diagnosis process itself is very impairment-based, and so you end up having to almost prove that you are having enough struggles to get across the diagnosis line in order to access the support, so things like medications, and there are other aspects as well. And so, it is pretty overwhelming going through all of that. It's pretty confusing. And nowhere along the way do any of the medical practitioners say, by the way, you will also be incredibly insightful and innovative and have a strong empathy and be a great leader. There are a whole lot of positive traits as well.
Yeah.
That's not really discussed. And so I have to say the whole diagnosis process for both myself and for the kids leaves you feeling pretty low about the whole thing. And it was in the sort of following years as I read more and more about it and learnt about even the word neurodiversity and the sort of more neuro-affirming positive sort of look at these different brain wirings that I started to appreciate and feel better about the whole thing and sort of feel a bit more in control of, okay, what do I need to be my best in the workplace and what do my kids need,
Because the word has got deficit and both deficit and disorder, which both kind of carry negative connotations.
Yeah.
What did you learn around your children and the way in which it meant you had to help them with their learning?
They need a lot of structure. They need to know what's happening and when. So, routine is quite important. Simple instructions. So this, then that, not a whole lot of words around it. I think connection over correction is something that really stuck with me in one of the parenting courses that I did. So, children by the age of 12, an ADHD child will have received 20,000 more negative criticisms than a neurotypical child. And so just knowing that makes you kind of change your approach, right?
Why is that, do you think? Because is it to do with, I know ADHD has a relationship with regulation, like emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Is it because, I guess, attention challenges and
differences in executive functions is the kind of the term that is used to describe kind of like the things that govern your brain. I like to think of them as the kind of men in black in your forehead that are governing your actions. So they affect things like activation, which is the ability to get started on things. So that sort of plays out as procrastination and sort of hard to start things. Focus is sort of maintaining focus on things that are not interesting. So our brains are wired for interest, not importance. We're kind of seeking the dopamine, But also emotional regulation and the ability to kind of monitor yourself in the moment. So to know how long you've been speaking for just now.
Right.
Or notice that you've been gaming for 1 hour or whatever it may be in a child setting,
Yeah.
So that sort of self-regulation and self-monitoring seems to be a bit different in those with ADHD.
How did you know what to do or how to help as a parent? Because you were only just learning about this yourself, and I know many parents who are in this situation kind of constantly feel like they're learning.
Yeah.
Where did you go to for information? What did you do?
I have to say there wasn't a lot of support. So you kind of get a label, a diagnosis, you get some medication to try, and there isn't a lot of mention of other support other than, maybe go to some parenting classes, but they're not designed for the ADHD brain. So some of the things they say are wonderful, and some of the things actually don't work for brains that are wired this way. So you're kind of, trying to swim against the tide kind of thing. So I found most help in reading books. So authors like Russell Barclay, Ned Halliwell is another good one. Websites like Attitude magazine, that's probably where I first got my information about ADHD, because it's kind of nice and bite-sized, so you can kind of like figure out a thing you want to read about, and it's easy to read, right? Because the great irony is some of these, books about ADHD, an ADHD can't read.
Right.
They are so heavy. You never get through it. You buy it and it sits beside your bed for the next year.
Yes, yeah.
There's also a really good course that's run by Tracy Roundtree through ADHD New Zealand. That was really good. That was, I think, 6 sessions or 6 sessions maybe. That was quite helpful as well.
And we spoke a little about the superpowers, all the positive things that can come with an ADHD brain. Do you speak with your children about that? Because you speak with it so much in your work setting. And so what do you say to your kids about that?
I try to highlight to them what they're good at, because I think that's probably what I didn't get through my diagnosis process and I didn't know before all of this, that some of the things that I'm quite good at are actually because of my ADHD brain wiring, and that they're common things that ADHDers are good at. So when I spot that in my kids, I try to highlight it to them, and try to, if we're going to encourage certain activities or decide to invest in classes for a certain thing, we'll try to lean into those strengths and amplify the things that they're good at. One of my kids would like to be a tech billionaire, so I'm all for that one.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And has the potential to be, I'm sure.
Well, he's really interested in tech, so and he's self-taught, like he watches videos and teaches himself how to do things. So, there's a chance.
I think the thing too is there are different types of ADHD, right? And so that's something that I'm sure in a workplace setting and in a school setting, the understanding around the differences is really important. Have you found that?
Yeah, so there's the inattentive type, there's the hyperactive type, and there's combined type. So that's the way that the medical diagnosis kind of, you get one of those 3, attributes. But in reality, it's sort of a continuum, and each individual is different. So I like to think of it like a mixer board. Imagine like a mixer board with everyone's sort of traits are dialed up or down to a slightly different number across a range of settings. And then the other complexity is that it changes depending on the context. So somebody that's under stress might present differently, or somebody that's not had enough sleep last night, or somebody that, didn't have a good breakfast and so they're also hungry, or they're hormonal, they're going through puberty, all of these things also affect the same hormones that drive the behaviours that we see for ADHD.
So how do you manage those big emotions in your children?
I think, co-regulation is a really good strategy. So knowing that if you can remain calm, you're modelling to them what calm looks like. Not punishing them for emotions is probably another really key thing. So knowing they can't help the way that they're feeling, that the way that they're feeling is it's strong. The ADHD is feelings more strongly than others. Literally, our synapses get flooded with the emotion signals, so we feel things really strongly. And so when you've got a kid who's having a meltdown, especially if they're ADHD, you've got to let them kind of get it out, model co-regulation, go for connection over sort of trying to push them away from the emotion, and then have a chat about it afterwards. It's really hard to speak to a child who's, on fight or flight mode.
Yeah. What have you learned around how to partner with the school in terms of helping your child to thrive in that setting as well?
Yeah, close connection with the teacher. It's always really interesting to see how it plays out in different settings. So, I've got one child who, basically masks all day. He camouflages himself all day, and then he lets it all out as soon as he gets in the car. He doesn't even wait till he gets home.
Yeah.
So, he doesn't quite show up in the same way at school, but it's useful to know, because you're wondering, gosh, is he acting like this in the classroom, and how is that affecting his learning and affecting others? So yeah, close connection with the teachers. I really like this idea, and I've seen it done really well at the school that I'm at, where you have kind of a one-pager, how to get the best from me, or how to help me learn, and it's about things that trigger me, things that I'm really interested in, because that's quite a key thing for ADHDers. So let's apply the learning on a thing that I'm interested in, my other son was struggling with story writing, and they decided they would do story writing for these imaginary, these characters. So they came up with these, wild characters, and he suddenly was into story writing,
Yeah, because it's the dopamine hit, I guess. It's giving that shot of adrenaline, the interest that engages an ADHD brain.
Yeah. So sort of slowly building up that knowledge of what is the kind of the manual of your child, what works best for them. And then as each year goes by, you're needing to communicate that usually to a new teacher. Of course, it will change over time. Their interests change. What they're good at might change, or what you notice might change as well. And yeah, my kids are 10 and 8, so I've yet to see what happens when we hit puberty. I'm sure it's going to change too.
What was the diagnosis process like for them, if there are other parents listening who are interested in that? And also, I guess, just how do you talk to them about, being proud of what they have and who they are, and, not making it something that they feel badly about?
Yeah. I know that's something that's really important to me. The kind of how you talk to them about it. I mean, taking a balanced approach. So you don't want to undermine the challenges, but you do want to make sure that they understand there are strengths, and that they are not broken. That they're just different.
Yeah. And
that lots of people are actually different. 15 to 20% of the human population are thought to be neurodivergent in some way.
15%?
15 to 20, yeah.
Wow.
So 10% dyslexic. I had no idea about any of this until I had, read the statistics, when I got into this space. ADHD is around 5%. Some statistics have it higher in children and slightly lower in adults, so around 2.5, 2.6% in adults. In New Zealand, about 1% are diagnosed, or 1% of adults are diagnosed. But back to the diagnosis process, recommending people go to their GPs for a referral to either a paediatrician, a child psychologist, or a psychiatrist. That's the pathway. And then there's a whole lot of forms to fill out, and a sort of 2-hour session is often how it plays out. But different practitioners will do the process differently. But for us, there was a lot of... But they're looking to see how do these differences play out in different settings. So they're wanting to understand at home and at school, and any other sort of settings you can draw from.
Right. Let's talk about some of those things that can help manage that? And you mentioned cognitive load earlier, which is kind of the ability to hold information in your head, right?
Yeah.
And how much you can have in that kind of working memory, which is the new stuff as opposed to your long-term memory.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? What are some strategies you use?
We bought these great little things off Temu, actually. They were they're like a to-do list in the morning, like eat your breakfast, get dressed, put your shoes on, do your homework, and it's got a physical slider, from a tick to a cross, or other way around, cross to a tick, so that, they all go green, and then you can watch your device or do whatever you like, kind of thing. So visualizing and getting it out of your head and being having something like tactile like that is a really good strategy. But just basically, visualizing with either pictures or checklists. If your children are old enough for words, checklists. When they were younger, we used to have little pictures of what the steps were. I've heard of people even doing, holding a sticky note to remember what you're doing. If you're really struggling to kind of remember and follow a routine, it's kind of like, this is what I'm doing. I will not get distracted on the way.
Because I've still got this sticky note.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the workplace because that's where you're working now. That's the field you're working in. What are some of the things that workplaces could be doing to better support people with ADHD? And I'm asking this because I'm wondering whether there's any lessons there that would also filter through to the classroom as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is sort of acceptance of difference. So it comes into sort of awareness raising and knowing that not everyone is going to behave and communicate in the same way. Some people communicate with more energy, They're not being aggressive. That's just the way that they talk. Some people's brains work really fast, and when they interrupt you, it's not because they were trying to talk over you. It's just that they sort of couldn't hold that thought in and they impulsively said it. So a lot of it comes down to sort of understanding of difference. Flexibility around how and where people work. There's the whole sort of work from home debate, but also flexibility in the way that you work. So usually people will have, by the time they become an adult, they will have understood sort of what works best for them. Mm-hmm. But sometimes workplaces or leaders kind of try to massage you into working a certain way, but that you need to kind of whiteboard something with somebody. So that could be something you could translate into classrooms, just sort of that autonomy around how people approach a task, how children approach a task, and asking them how they work best. You'll be surprised what comes out,
Are more and more workplaces interested in this area? Right. And how they get the most out of their staff, I guess. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, they are interested. New Zealand's about 10 years behind the UK, I would say. And I started this business, I'm a year in, I wasn't sure if there would be enough interest in New Zealand yet. I wondered if I was too soon for New Zealand. And there are a couple of other providers in this space as well. But I'm really pleasantly surprised with the level of interest, and it's growing very quickly. So most organisations, especially large organisations, have an employee resource group, which is kind of like a network to provide support and that peer support across the organisation. They're starting to do awareness training, have their leaders go on sort of specifically, how do I lead different types of brains? But the drivers for them are innovation and, that divergent thinking and productivity benefits when you bring together a whole lot of different people in teams. Also the talent retention, when you realise that 15 to 20% of your workforce are likely to be neurodivergent and maybe aren't having a great experience at work, and their mental health and well-being is being impacted. That's a really kind of easy win for keeping talent and keeping talent engaged, which, affects the bottom line as well.
What would you say are some of the benefits in a workplace setting of someone who has an ADHD brain?
Yeah, so different thinking, so divergent thinking, quite insightful. So we're often able to make connections between things before others do, because our brain works really, really quickly, and we can kind of see patterns in data or patterns in information and go, I can connect this idea with this idea. And so you get there quite quickly. High energy, often great in sales roles or customer-facing roles where, I found as a project manager, clients loved seeing somebody that was high energy, that was clearly going to kind of take on their problem and work hard to solve it. They're often very empathetic leaders, so the ability to read people quite well. We're kind of picking up on a lot of things, so our senses are dialed up. So we are picking up on, what other people are feeling and so able to respond to that.
Right.
Yeah.
This is quite confronting listening to some of this stuff because I'm going, oh, yeah, okay. But you don't kind of think about ADHD like that sometimes, I think, because there's the
stigma.
Yeah, and a lot of talk about how it's, losing things and not being able to hold down a job and, all of the things that you hear that are challenges that can be really, get in the way of life.
Yeah.
And you're here as an example of someone who has done exceptionally well in your career and obviously, relates to people well, and I don't think people see that that's what ADHD is. And I think it's important we think about this when we think about it in a classroom setting, how much we can get out of children who have this way of thinking if we understand them better.
Yeah, and that there's hope for them. This is why parents are afraid of getting a diagnosis, but hearing some of this hopefully has you realising that, there's hope for them in their career. They are going to do great things. It's about finding the right environment and the right roles for them. And so to do that, you've got to sort of understand how you work best and then sort of think about, well, what sorts of environments might allow me to do that? I struggled earlier on when I had a role that required 40 hours of doing modelling on a computer and not interacting with people. I just struggled to get started. I procrastinated, I couldn't stay focused. It just felt like a battle. And I now know why, But I've sort of naturally gravitated to the things that I was better at. And I think most people do that, right?
Yeah. What's your final words, I guess, for parents if they were to just, pick out some lessons here or for teachers? What would you want them to take away?
I think being diagnosed with a neurodivergent condition, it's not the end of the story. That being different is different, not less. It's not about being broken. That it's about finding the right environment for your child and what they need, and each child will be different. So it's not like you can just learn what do ADHDers need. Yes, that's part of it, but it's about learning what your specific child needs in different settings. What is it that's brings out their best in different settings. And then I think I keep coming back to that connection over correction. I think there's been a shift in attitudes in parenting, and I think some of these shifts are particularly important for neurodivergent children because it really sets them up for, good self-esteem and, mental health as an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That punishment is not necessarily the right way to treat a child that's not going to respond to that in any case, maybe. Yeah,
like if they're responding in a way because of their brain wiring, it's very hard to punish them. They're just going to have to internalise it, basically. So, helping them develop strategies to prevent getting to that state in the first place. Helping them to understand the why behind things can be helpful as well. Yeah.
Has it been an emotional journey for you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I've had a real sort of burnout in the year that I discovered all of this, because it's a lot to process. It's a lot to get your head around, and there isn't a lot of support. And of course, the great irony is we're not talking about this very openly, and so it's not like you sort of turn around to your neighbours and friends and say, "Hey, how was your experience with this?" So it's kind of like this sort of suffering in silence while you figure it out on your own, and that's part of what I'm trying to change. Is just opening this conversation up a bit, hopefully breaking some stigma around what ADHD actually is by sharing my own story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a tough journey. It's a confusing journey as a parent because, of course, you've only parented your kids. So you don't have a lot of things to compare to,
Yeah, you think, is everyone else finding it this hard?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for opening this discussion and for coming at it from a personal viewpoint, but also in a professional setting too. I really hope it opens discussion with other families, and that it resonates with parents who might be on a similar journey or see some similarities with what you've been speaking about.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, Jenny. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.